This is In Goal Radio, the podcast, presented by The Hockey Shop. Source for sports, Surrey, thehockeyshop.com. This week, one of the first players to leave the market via free agency in 2020, Cam Talbot of the Minnesota Wild, in that multi-year deal, hooks up with In Goal Radio, the podcast, and chats with our own Kevin Woodley about the experience of not being able to travel around and meet with teams and just watching that clock turn noon Eastern time and waiting for the phone to ring. Plus, he goes to the goalie dungeon for a refresher and tells us what it's like going through the paces of preparing for a season that, quite frankly, we don't know when it's going to start. So Cam Talbot coming up in just a little bit. Plus, we head over to the Hockey Shop, Source for Sports Surrey, for a little check-in with Cam Matwit to talk about CCM Access and the goalie mask and the new pods or pads or gel pads. The full explanation is coming up, but it's technology advancement in the goalie mask, and not just the shell, but the padding areas. We bring in the co-founder of In Goal magazine, Kevin Woodley. You want to just help me out there a little bit about the pods?
Fluid Inside is the name of the pods, and basically the idea is these pods connect your head, almost forming like a coupling between your head and the mask as the principal point of contact, and it allows for a little bit of lateral give, a little bit of absorption of rotational impact. And we get into that with Cam when we talk to him and go over exactly how that works. But that's the concept. It's basically the theory, the science from the University of Ottawa behind developing these pods, and they've been used in all kinds of other sports. But it's all about sort of cerebral spinal fluid, which is what our brain floats in, and the idea that we should put our head and have that type of environment between our head and the mask to create some of those same properties. So big words, fancy
technology. That's a cool
technology.
explanation.
Well, it is a great way of thinking about it, and that's the theory behind it. It's one of those things where there are some numbers out there. If you check out the Fluid Inside website as well, where they've had some success in terms of measuring the impact and the rotational impact and the force that's applied to the head versus absorbed by the mask in bike helmets and in ski helmets and in other things. So listen, for us at In Goal, it's a chance to geek out on new tech, which we always like. And, frankly, as we were last week with the Bauer 960 mask, we're always impressed when that technology is being used to find new materials. It goes back to our first ever podcast episode, Sonia DiBiase with CCM, going to the automotive shows to find new materials and foams and ideas. Well, the technology has increased. Love it when companies go out and find new innovative ways to try and make us safer, to protect our heads better. And so whether that's Poron in a Bauer mask, D3O in a CCM mask, or now with the Axis mask, the addition of the fluid pods, it's all positive. It's all designed to make us safer. And it's all explained by Cam at the Hockey Shop this week. You mentioned the goalie dungeon. That is Pat Dipronio, the longtime goaltending coach of Cam Talbot. The goalie dungeon is what they affectionately refer to as the Granger Training Center in Hamilton. We go downstairs at the Hockey Shop, but it's definitely not a dungeon for goalies. We used to call it goalie heaven. We've been corrected. We shouldn't use that term there. Thanks to our listener who told us there's a store with that name that he loves. This is goalie utopia. And the reason we go down there is to have guys like Cam explaining to us things like fluid pods and how it works. The other reason you should go down there and check them out at the Hockey Shop, sales. I've been told. Oh, really? I've been told to keep an eye out. The next big one will obviously be Black Friday, so we've got a little time before we get to there. But in the meantime, there's already markdowns on a lot of material. Goal sticks 30 to 50% off last year's model. A lot of Bauer 2S that are still available there. Leg pads 30 to 50% off last year's models. Catchers, big one to me. CCM Premier Protective markdowns. You know how fond I am of the CCM Premier chest protector, which has been replaced by the Axis, but basically just upgraded. You can get last year's model for $450 Canadian, used to be $650, so a little over $100 off on that one. And remember, folks, that's Canadian. If you're a U.S. shopper, the exchange is even better. And discounts continue. 120 off the CCM Premier R19 LE and into the junior sizes. Same with the pants. Big fan of the CCM Premier LE goalie pants. Regular $369 on right now for $259. Make sure you check them out at the Hockey Shop, thehockeyshop.com.
We have the goalie carousel that has slowed down, and people can get on and off without any chance of endangering themselves because it's almost stopped, quite frankly. And some players have been left out. A couple of teams maybe have been left out or chose not to get involved. For the players that don't have a team right now, and with Gary Bettman, the commissioner of the National Hockey League, aiming for a January 1st start date, and that's fluid as well. Might we see more goaltenders be invited to camp on professional tryout offers, the PTO, which we've seen a number of players, skaters in the past, take advantage of that. But goaltending right now may be a viable option or the only option.
Well, I think most teams have their depth chart filled out 1 and 2. The exception right now would be the Anaheim Ducks. There seems to be, they have options there, but I think the expectation was that a Ryan Miller would be back there, and we haven't seen that be made official. I'm kind of curious. Also, the Corey Schneider deal, even Lou Lamoriello indicated that was a deal that was likely coming at $700,000, a real bargain there, and an important number 3 role, because I don't know that you can snap your fingers and expect Ilya Sorokin, their prized Russian, to just step into the NHL. We saw it with Shesterkin last year. Half a year in the A, adjusted to a game that is very different in terms of how direct it is, how much smaller the rink is, how much more that traffic comes to you in the net, and how much less time you have. So, to me, it's fascinating. What's going to happen to those number 3 guys? Because some teams took care of it right away. Some teams have plans in place. Like we mentioned Schneider with the Islanders as a likelihood. But other teams haven't. And there's some of those names that are still out there on the unrestricted market haven't found roles, haven't found spots to play. And I think that's going to be fascinating. And yeah, maybe PTOs are an option here, but there's so much uncertainty. Like, it's a big ask to ask guys to wait for a PTO. And usually in a goalie situation, you're not trying out for the 1 or 2 hole. You're there on a PTO to land a job in the organization as a number 3. Well, we have an idea when we hope the NHL season will start, but no indication when the American League season will start, which brings us to another question, and one I frankly don't have an answer to, but I'm sort of poking around now with some of these guys who haven't been signed, is we're looking at a condensed schedule. Everybody agrees on that. We've seen and heard general managers and goalies talk about the importance of having 2 guys who can start to get through this condensed schedule. Well, what was the other thing that everybody felt was really important? Especially, we're not talking about a 1-month bubble where teams are dropping off in the first couple of weeks as they're eliminated. We're talking about a season, 48, however many games it is, a season condensed. You are gonna need 3. And if there's no American Hockey League to call them up from, and it's not like the bubble we just had with the playoffs where teams brought 3 and 4 goaltenders into Toronto and into Edmonton because there was no salary cap. These teams are right up against the cap. They're probably going to need 3 goalies. There's no guarantees about, we've heard about American League teams maybe even being relocated temporarily so they're on the right side of the border for Canadian teams. Like, where are they going to put these third goalies? They can't fit them on their roster for cap space. They absolutely are going to need them to keep the other 2 fresh in practice and maybe need them in games. Like, I'm trying to figure out not just who's going to start signing them and when, but where are they even keeping them as the season goes on to be able to use them?
You may have to have a taxi squad that that replicates your American Hockey League team, and you have to send players up and down via that and expose them to waivers. And
to and from where? That's the thing. We don't even know about an American League season. You're certainly not, for example, here in Vancouver, you are not sending you haven't got a taxi going between Utica and Vegas. We make
it might be in the same. I would think if you would do a taxi squad scenario, that taxi squad is in the NHL city. But if you're going to call up an injury or somebody for poor performance, they have to go through the same waiver process.
So basically create almost like a practice squad that's sitting there waiting, but to call them up, you have to go. And
you
again,
have to go through because the salary cap it gets too messy if you don't have that protocol in place that's standard that we're used to because of the cap and the waivers.
So you're saying we could have a de facto sort of American Hockey League taxi squad here in Vancouver that I could just hire out for my beer league team?
That would be outstanding. Like a Tuesday night at 9:30.
All defensemen. Absolutely. Like
Shot blockers.
I am for sure like you're a defensive defenseman waiting on your chance in the NHL. I got a game for you. If you're an offensive forward, no thanks.
We're going to get into the mask, the CCM Access mask in just a little bit, but I got a chance to play last Friday, and we've played, I think, 3 Fridays in a row now, and I'm kind of in this headspace right now where I have the beautiful Access pads and gloves, but I've gone and I'm wearing a different mask. I have this goofy, like some people collect cars, music, guitars, whatever. I got masks over the years, and I've been wearing a different mask every time. I've never worn a CCM mask.
We're gonna have to rectify that to match your gear now. You're as part of the in-goal crew. There's a certain style requirement, Darren, that has to be met. You can't be out there in an Arthur's Urbe like bird cage.
No, it's not. It's not that. But I didn't, and I did bring it up to get a mask. But it's just like I thought. I've worn Bauer. I've worn iTech. I've worn Sport Mask. I've worn some that I don't even know who made them. Quite frankly, I have shells that along that line, but I've never worn the CCM. I don't know why.
Well, in part because it's a relatively new mask. And the shell construction that you see in this Axis mask is a continuation of the GFL mask that, I think we're 2 or 3 generations into that. And frankly, before that, the masks that CCM made weren't ones that were used at the pro level, and therefore the trickle down was minimal. There wasn't a lot of people using them. Since they developed this mask, I guarantee you the first comment you'll make when we get you in one, and we'll have to get you in one now, will be about the sight lines and the down sight lines. And that was one of the things that they established right away when they came out with this mask for the first time, and that goalies noticed right away and that they adopted. You can ask Marc-Andre Fleury, who's in it there, was just the sight lines and the ability to see down. The multiple fit options that they have was a big one for them, and we talk about that with Cam. And now as they've added through the generations, I've got an old one on the wall with just the plain old foam. Now, as they've added the smart foams, they've just gotten better and better. So I think part of the reason a lot of people haven't tried it is, frankly, it hasn't been a really attractive option up until the last, top of head, I want to say 5 or 6 years. And now we're seeing guys adopt them and use them, not just at the NHL, but when we see that happen, we see people use them at lower levels as well.
I'm really excited to hear your conversation with Cam about this new technology that they're putting in and the latest iteration. This is In Goal Radio, the podcast, presented by the Hockey Shop, Source for Sports Surrey, as we send you to Goalie Utopia. And it's Kevin Woodley in conversation with Cam, Part 1, the Matwip version.
Welcome back to the Hockey Shop, Source for Sports here in Surrey, British Columbia. And for those of you who aren't as lucky as we are that we can just pop into the shop and visit him in person, make sure you check them out at thehockeyshop.com. We're back in Goalie Utopia, which is pretty much the greatest place in the world for goaltenders, with Cam Matwiv on the lower floor of the Hockey Shop, Source for Sports. 3 levels here. The basement floor, we actually shouldn't even call it the basement, should we? We just call it the lower level, is 100% dedicated to goaltenders. It really is utopia if you stop pucks. You name it, they've got it. The latest and greatest from all the major brands, as well as a lot of little items, little trinkets and tips and small things you can wear, whether it's strapping or sweatbands, custom little things that Cam has found over the years to help you be more comfortable and be better at stopping pucks. Speaking of being more comfortable, Cam, we're going to stick with the helmet theme. Oh, I called it a helmet. I must be like Hutch. We're going to go to the mask theme. Stick with the mask theme. We talked last week about Bauer, the new 960, and the new foams. This week, we're going to go to the CCM Access mask. And the foams have improved. or they've used more of their D3O foam, which is their impact absorbing foam, but they've added a whole nother level to the concept of modern science helping protect the goaltender's head. Tell me about fluid inside and the way that the CCM Axis mask has incorporated it.
For sure, yeah. So we'll call it all new for the 2020 model year.
Well, the shell hasn't changed.
Yes, still made their Sigma-Tex carbon fiber shell, which has carried over from the previous Pro model mask. But again, as you alluded to, the addition of the more D3O foam basically surrounding almost all points for the mask. But the fluid inside and IQ cushion as well. Those fluid inside pods actually coming from another sport, football helmets in particular. With the study they've done in terms of impact reduction, concussions and whatnot, basically is what they have found to absorb some of the most shock and impact. So CCM, being the astute company that they are, take a look over the fence, see what's working. Why not apply it to what we've got? So here we have with fluid inside, basically.
Yeah, and so basically it's a small little pod that attaches to the helmet, and the idea is that it provides additional protection. Like when we take a direct hit, there is also rotational force applied. And what these pods do is they sort of attach to your head is not the right word, but they're the primary point of contact. You still want the mask to fit like it normally would, but these things sort of stick out a little bit and they become sort of that initial point of contact. And so even on a direct impact, there's going to be some shearing, some side rotational impact, and the pods absorb that. If you've seen the video that we included in the review we did at ingoalmag.com, you can see how these pods will shift and move. And again, allow the mask to move around your head a little bit as part of direct impact absorption, but also if you get a glancing blow, somebody cutting through the crease, there's going to be some give there and some rotational give on the mask. Now, of course, the question that a lot of people asked before we had a chance to test it was, well, if the mask is going to move, is it going to feel loose? And that wasn't the case for as long as it was properly fitted. And obviously we just had one to test, so we had to make sure we had people in the right size. But as long as you were in the proper size, it never felt loose on our tester's head. So you still had that traditional mask feel. But if you took that glancing blow, if you took that shot off the side of the head, somebody cutting through the crease, there's going to be a little bit of give there before it starts taking your, again, rotational force is absorbed. And I wanted to stress that rotational force, I originally thought, as a matter of fact, when I was writing the review, that it was all about rotational force and that was only caused by the glancing blow, for example. But really, there's rotational force applied to our head, even when it's a slap shot, clapper right off the middle bar, still provides some of that rotational force. And these pods are designed to reduce how much of that is transferred into our heads. In a way, it was designed by some scientists at the University of Ottawa, or through a partnership with the University of Ottawa, to sort of mimic our own brain and cerebral spinal fluid and the way our brain floats in cerebral spinal fluid, by creating basically a pod that acted the same way on the outside. So our whole head becomes sort of what's floating inside this fluid. And it's kind of a simplified way of looking at it, but fascinated by the science. You know us at Ingle, we're all about development and tech and science. If you can find a way to make a product better rather than just slapping the same old thing out there, we're interested. And so the science we checked out on it, you can check out the website at Fluid Inside as well. There are some claims there in terms of some numbers that I don't know CCM as a hockey company is going to be allowed to make, just because they're governed differently. But if you really look at the science in terms of some of the testing they've done on bike helmets and other impact tests using the fluid inside, because this technology is, like you said, football, it's starting to be used by a lot of other companies that are in impact sports. There are some numbers there that are quite compelling in terms of how much energy is transferred on impact with and without the fluid inside pod. So really cool thing. I think from our testing standpoint, and I saw this at the NHL level because I saw early versions of this on Anders Nilsson 2 years ago, on Aiden Hill 2 years ago, long before anybody had a hint it was coming. And you'd see a little bit of red marks as they took it off after an hour and a half out there, where that was the primary point of contact. But our testers felt, and I don't know if this is the feedback you've gotten, Cam, that even if maybe you notice it at first, or if you think about it, that's what's touching you. As soon as you start playing, like it's not annoying or prevalent enough that it's in your mind unless you actually think about it.
it goes away. It's like almost like a hand kind of hovering just over your face. Like, it's there, but it's not bothering you by any means. And so far, yeah, that does echo similar feedback that we've gotten on the helmet. Comfortable kind of off the helmet, but also minimal enough. Like, it doesn't feel overly invasive, like you mentioned. So really positive feedback in that sense. So it's been some exciting. Like, I haven't had a direct feedback as I got smacked in the face and here's like how it felt sort of thing. We're still kind of lacking that review, I would say. So
if you'd like me to, we could put one on right now and I will throw pucks at your head.
I feel like that's hyper scientific, but almost not scientific enough for the feedback that I'm looking for.
Well, I mean, the arm's not what it used to be. I can probably still get it up there around 80 for you. I don't know if I'd actually hit you. I might hit you elsewhere. We'd have to put on full gear. Like, I'm all about, taking one for the team here, or actually I'm all about having you take one for the team. So you just let me know. We'll set up that video. Maybe I'll see if I can borrow a puck shooting cannon from Angelo over at Magic Goaltending, and we'll just start firing away at your head. This kind of feels to me like this testing is when we had the bulletproof cups, and the claim was that you could take a 38 caliber off the cup, and for some reason I couldn't find anyone that was willing to test that one either.
Yeah, I think you're on an island there. Yeah, I'll pass on being your first tester for that one.
Okay, well, let's get back to the mask because there are other improvements. I talked about the shell being the same shape. That's a good thing. If you were one of the people that tried this CCM shell, the down vision is especially if you've got a good fit, and that was the other part. They've added a fit, and they've already had a lot of good fitting options. Like, they had a full range of fit options. We talked about it last week with Bauer expanding their fit options. Again, to me, more options means more likelihood of a good fit, and that's essential for masks. The down vision in this is the one thing that jumped out to goalies as they were testing it. Way back, guys that switched into the CCM early, adopted it quickly in the NHL. None of that changes with this shell shape, but they have added, as much as just the fluid inside pods, they've added more of the D3O style protection in other areas.
Correct, and it's visibly noticeable on the helmet itself. You can actually see it when you're checking out all the pieces of foam. You can see the D3O lined underwhere, the forehead. You can see it lined into the cheeks and all the way out throughout the crown of the helmet in particular.
And the chin cup as well. They put it, again, we talk about impact absorbing. We've all had that shot that gets us flush on the chin and it feels like being punched in the mouth. This is going to help with that.
That's correct. Yes. And then also too, surrounding their helmet, and they've used it kind of extensively, kind of throughout the crown of the head in particular, their IQ cushion foam. So just a softer, a little bit more, squishier foam, for lack of a better term.
And it's rich in finish. Again, it's got that, it's a sealed foam.
Mm-hmm.
So water's going to beat off it. It's not going to absorb the water. And it just got a richer feel to it. For lack of a better term, it feels like a better quality foam. And it's got, I think the word you used last week was it supple, soft and supple?
Supple. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why we come to you, Cam. You're the expert. We come to Goalie Utopia for soft and supple. But there is a richness to this material versus, say, a traditional just VN foam liner.
That's correct. Yeah. And it kind of helps to make that helmet pop off the wall a little bit more. Well, pop, not necessarily, because you can't really see it until you pick the helmet up, but once you do, you will start to notice that.
This was part of the challenge for Ingle and our photographer extraordinaire, David Hutchison. The most attractive sort of parts of this mask in terms of visually are the inside, but never easy to photograph. I thought he did a hell of a job with that.
Kudos to him.
Well, I got to fluff him up here a little bit because I was giving him a hard time about calling it a helmet earlier. So
fair enough.
Okay, so walk me through some of the other features and let's go through the rest of the line real quick.
Yeah, so pretty much for features-wise, we kind of covered pretty much most of it.
The IQ cushion foam is also in the back plate?
That's correct, yeah. So you still do have that softer feel as opposed to some of the helmets, which just use a standard VN foam when it comes to the back plate itself.
And the back plate itself now in this model has the harness strap is screwed into the back plate, which used to be a feature that was actually only on their pro models.
Yes, I mean, same thing here as well. It carries over from last year as well, not to correct you, but they still already had that before.
Well, I'm 2 generations behind. My mask is a little old. I'm sorry, Cam. I wasn't keeping up. This is why we come to you again, to correct my mistakes.
So yeah, I'd say that pretty much sums up the brand new CCM 2020 Axis mask. However,
last question on Axis before you go into the smaller lines. You mentioned that there was an additional fit option.
So the fit option actually still was available in last year's helmet as well, but it's just nice to see that they have small all the way through to XL, whereas we see a lot of slash sizing or just small, medium, and large, for example. So this fourth additional fit, again, like you said, helping to dial in guys just that much more, and a nice additional option because XLs are a little harder to find, especially.
Yeah, so it's the XL is the fit that's correct. And again, because you've now corrected me twice, we're going to have to require an XL to get over top of your fast inflating noggin. Just to get you out of the room, we're going to have to put you in an XL, and we are definitely going to do a stress test, by the way. Forget me throwing pucks at you. Another couple lines out of you, and we're going to be hitting you with a stick. Okay, now I'm going to allow you to go through the rest of it while I simmer down over here.
So when you drop down, you have their Axis A1.9 model being their senior model price point. Fiberglass mold, still featuring D3O and IQ cushion.
Okay, so no fluid pods, but you still get the D3O, which
correct.
is a smart foam that absorbs impact, and you're still getting that rich feeling IQ cushion.
Exactly. So you're getting a lot of value out of what is your middle of the road price point helmet in particular.
And those are new, no? Because I'm not sure if there was D3O in the 1.9 previous. I don't believe so. And they didn't have the IQ cushion, however you want to say it. I can spell it, not say it. They didn't have that in the mid price point last time.
That's correct. Yeah. So it is.
I got one right.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, so there you go. 1 for 3.
Keep going.
You got me now. Kevin.
After the 1.9, we go to
1.5. Take it on a step down. We go into a polycarbonate mask in particular. That will be more of your entry level helmet that covers us all the way down to youth in particular. Basically, you're still getting a good standard shock absorbing foam. You don't get any of that D3O or the IQ cushion. It's a standard VN foam in particular. You've got a couple decal options too as well to kind of liven up the mask a little bit, especially in that junior price point. But that'd be about it. That kind of rounds off our CCM lineup for this year.
Nice. And like I said, if you got any more questions, if you got questions about fit, if you got questions about what you need or what your son or daughter needs for the level they're playing to make sure that you can find a mask that's going to be safe. I told this story last week. I'll reiterate it really quickly again this week. Last week we were doing the Bauer mask, and just a coincidence, young man came in before we could slip into the back room, or as they call it, the vault, where all the gear is stored, to record the podcast. A young man came in with his parents, and he was looking at maybe upgrading his mask. Cam had already gone through all the fits. The young man didn't make the team he was hoping, didn't step up to the level he was hoping. He was in the same level. Cam took a look at it, took a look at all the other fit options, and at the end of the day, what he had was still plenty safe, and still fit really well. As a matter of fact, maybe better than some of the other options he was looking at. So advised him quite openly and honestly, rather than just selling him something new and fancy and taking his money, advised him that he was good where he was for now, and let's revisit it in a few months down the road. And I love that honesty. I love that approach. It's about finding what's best for you, not just making a sale at any cost. It's why we come to you, Cam. It's why other people should come to the Hockey Shop Source for Sports, or check you out at thehockeyshop.com. Or if they have questions directly, Cam is a guy to make sure you find the mask that fits you best, the brand that's going to fit and going to protect you and keep you safe. If they've got questions and they want to talk to you personally, Cam, where do they catch you?
I can talk to me on the phone, 604-589-8299.
He'll actually do a better radio voice than that when you call him directly. It'll be a little more baritone and a little smoother. But Cam, thank you very much for having us here. That's 2 masks in 2 weeks. We did Bauer last week. We did Axis this week. I'm looking forward to coming back next week to Goalie Utopia here at the Hockey Shop Source for Sports, hockeyshop.com. You can check them out and figuring out what we're going to talk about next. Can't wait.
Sounds like a plan to me. Thanks, Kevin.
I didn't think I would ever be that person, but because I was always just fascinated by the shell and the shape of the mask. And some masks I just loved the way they looked on goaltenders, and others I was like, geez, that looks a little different. And I'm not sure it passes the mirror test. But now I'm right into the foams and these pods and just the more awareness that I have, and we all have, Woody, thanks to people like you that can bring us this information, is extraordinary. The protection inside the shell.
Yeah, it's it was Ryan Miller actually. I think I want to say we were talking about this about 2 years ago. He was with the Ducks actually. I remember him coming into town. We just started talking masks. And he talked about how, even in his case, he had a custom built mask, but he had added some of these, you can buy these advanced foams, and he'd had them add this impact absorbing foam into them. And he felt it was kind of absurd that they were still, up until the past couple of years, essentially being made and lined the same way they were 30 and 40 years ago, like that nothing had changed. And so I think shell construction has obviously gotten better. There's impact absorption there. We talked about, remember the smack wrap last week with Bauer, and how they integrated that into the shell itself. The blends of carbon, the different things, Kevlar in layers, things you can do to protect the shell. The next step had to be, at a time when we have all these new foams out there used in things like motorcycles and helmets in other sports and impact absorbing foams, it just makes sense to start adding some of these materials to the head. And it's nice to see companies invest the resources, whether it's through research and development on their own or partnerships with companies like Fluid Inside or D3O, or in Bauer's case, Poron, to not just work with these new materials, but test them and do the research to make sure they work effectively. So curious to hear more feedback. It's not a mask that has been out there a long time, this Axis with the Fluid Inside. I have a couple NHLers who were in it as much as 2 full seasons ago in early versions that I had talked to through the process that liked it. But I'm curious to see where this goes. We had some questions on Instagram about the pods. Would they rupture? Would there be breaks? We haven't heard any of that anecdotally. We haven't seen any problems with it ourselves. But anytime you have a new technology, it's probably important that we don't just stand up here and scream from the rooftops how much we love it. We do like new ideas, but we're going to stay on top of it and test it and see how it works and see if there are any issues long term. But so far, both in terms of fit, feel, and in terms of how it stays intact in the mask, we haven't had any problems.
Of course, the next step in this goalie carousel and then mask technology and getting new equipment is what the kit's going to look like and what the mask is going to look like. I chatted with Jake Allen, just exchanged messages after he signed the contract. Thank you for putting me in touch with Jake. I really appreciate it. And he said the mask is finished. He just doesn't have it yet. So like his Habs mask, I cannot wait to see that. And then somebody like Cam Talbot with the Minnesota Wild, Braden Holtby with the Vancouver Canucks, what we're going to see for new mask designs.
I'm excited, and actually, you've now made me regret the one question. I should have last questioned Cam Talbot one more time and asked him if he was going to go Ghostbusters, because I've heard him talk about it before. Like the theme was so obvious in New York, and the theme started in New York because he's actually lived, evidently, when he was playing with the Rangers, close to the fire station where that was filmed or where it was based. And it made all the sense in the world. And Dave Art had always wanted to make a Ghostbusters mask. So that became something that was a theme for him. But it doesn't really apply as well in Edmonton and Calgary and Minnesota. So I'm curious which way he goes. They really do become a part of identity. And I think it's fascinating. We'll have to talk about this next week because I want to dig into it a little bit. Like some of the origins tying to Halloween and masks and scary designs and some of the iconic early ones. I think of Corey Hirsch with the Psycho one. Some of the ones that I know Dave Gunnarsson has talked about. Some of those Halloween scary spooky themed masks as being some of the true iconic ones that were part of him getting involved to the level he is now.
I'm going to hold you to that conversation in next week's episode of In Goal Radio, the podcast. David Hutchison will be with us for that one, so we'll have a nice little roundtable on our favorites. There's some old ones from the form-fitting right to the face mask, the original style, and now with the cage combo. One area that I do have a theory on when it comes to Cam Talbot, I will save for after the conversation, but I think there's a real fit here for my idea. Maybe I'll have to send it to Cam if you like it, but I'll save it to see if it passes the Woodley and the listener test after we listen to the conversation, our feature interview this week on In Goal Radio, the podcast presented by The Hockey Shop, source for sports Surrey, thehockeyshop.com. Woodley in touch with Cam Part 2, Talbot edition.
Cam, so many questions that we wanted to get to with you, going back to how the passion for goaltending started, but I wanted to focus on the immediate right away. What's this last little bit been like? I think we see the game of musical chairs for goalies every year, but this year was probably like none other. What was it like to live it? What's that process like in terms of waiting, trying to evaluate options, knowing what options you can actually look at? Like, what's that like to go through?
Exciting, nerve-wracking. There's so many things that go into it. So many decisions, and you just kind of look around the league and say, okay, these are the spots that are potentially open. And you just kind of go over it with your agent and hope that some of those teams call. So, like I said, we were lucky that we were one of the first ones off the board, which was a great feeling. There was no kind of waiting around. But that it was just stressful leading up, because you see all the guys in play and how many guys had such great years, and the competition was just going to be through the roof. So, if you don't get a spot early, you might be left without a seat. So it was definitely nerve wracking, but exciting once we got a couple calls and ultimately landed on Minnesota and couldn't be happier.
Was it easier? I mean, I know you went through it last year and you kind of bet on yourself on a short-term deal in Calgary, but was it easier with the courting period as opposed to having to sort of wait out? I mean, obviously there's information flying around in cyberspace and stuff, but was it easier the year before when you could actually have conversations with teams and maybe take that, noon deadline and sort of at least have an idea what's coming a little more?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, last year was just a lot less stressful. You have that 5-6 days, whatever it was last year, to legally talk to teams and stuff. But this year it was, you wait until noon and you hope the phone rings. So again, I was very lucky. My agent called me, half hour, 45 minutes in. There's a few offers already, and when one of them is Minnesota, and you look at the way that they play, their structure, their commitment to defense and stuff like that. I've played against them for a long time now, so it's definitely one of the places that goalie would like to go to. So, there wasn't much back and forth between us. It was an easy negotiation, and it's just putting pen to paper after that.
Well, okay, so funny you mentioned how a team plays, because I was curious. I've always been curious how much the teams themselves look at, hey, this is our system, this is our personnel, maybe these are the types of chances we give up, the type of chances we give up more of, less of. Does this goalie fit our team from a system standpoint? Do you ever look at it as a free agent on the other end beyond, hey, Minnesota's a pretty attractive team because they play well defensively, I know the structure? Do you ever look at it, like, is it possible to look at beyond that and say, hey, like, they're a rush team, they're an end zone team, this is a style that fits me? Or is that just too much to consider at this point? You're just you're looking for generalizations as opposed to specifics?
When it's coming down to, a quick decision when it comes to noon, you're just kind of looking at that. Like, we didn't even know that Minnesota was really going to be in play until they traded Doobie. So it was kind of one of those teams that you weren't really thinking about it at first, but then when they jump on the board, it's just like, well, that'd be an ideal place to play just from playing against them and kind of knowing that they don't give up a whole lot. So that obviously came into play here. And from my standpoint, playing in Minnesota, I think over my career there, I think I have some of the best numbers in my career at the XL Center. So, it's a great building to play in. The fans are great. Hopefully we can have them in the building at some point this year, if not definitely next. So, Minnesota just seemed like an ideal spot for myself, and we couldn't be happier.
I was going to ask you about the building. I saw the career numbers. I didn't look at the splits home and away, but career against the Wild, I think it's like a .930 save percentage. When you talk about having success there, I remember here in Vancouver, like, for whatever reason, the XL Energy Center was Roberto Luongo's personal house of horrors, and it became a storyline here. What is it? Is there anything about certain buildings that can fit a goaltender's eye? Is it just success leads to being comfortable there over time? Are there certain places where when you walk in, you just feel good?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough question. I mean, there's definitely buildings that I walk into and it's like, okay, I've had success here before. I feel comfortable here. And, I've had some of my better games here and you just walk in there feeling confident. So I think if you start off well there and it just continues to build, and there's a few buildings around the league for me and there's other buildings that kind of go the other way for me. So, the Energy Center was one of the places that I've had some of my better games, and I don't know the exact stats. I just, think about them over time and know, okay, had a big game here last year, had a big game here the year before that. And it just kind of builds in your mind as a goaltender when you walk in there. So, knowing that, and obviously knowing that, I was one of the first ones on their list to call, I assume. And, it's always, just nice to be given that opportunity and given that call. And you just want to go in there and reward the faith. So I'm looking forward to getting started and meeting the new group.
And I'm guessing 3 years was probably a nice bonus too, at a time when a lot of guys had to settle for 2-year contracts and term was not something that got offered out. For you to be able to settle in with your family in one spot after having to hop around last year, how much does that mean to you, especially with, I guess they're preschool age, your twins are now 4 or 5?
Yeah, they just turned 4 2 days ago. On Monday, they turned 4. So they're in preschool right now. So yeah, security and being able to put down some roots was definitely big for us. 2 or 3 year deals were thrown around. We took a little less to get that third year, but ultimately we wanted the security of the third year. And like you said, just to stop hopping around as much. I think we've moved 4 or 5 times in the past 16 months with the trade from Edmonton to Philly and then back and then over to Calgary. So it's just going to be nice to put down some roots and be in one spot for a while. So that was definitely a huge selling point for us and one that we couldn't pass up.
Okay, you mentioned the twins are in preschool now, so you're getting back into the rhythm of working out and what's that like for you in this environment? Is it any different than a regular off season? And you had so much success in the bubble, coming off such an odd time. I'm wondering if you can share what you did to prepare that allowed you to sort of hit the ground running with the Flames, and are there any lessons that you take away? If there are things you had to do a little bit differently, maybe because of everything that's going on in the world compared to a typical off season.
I mean, for me, I didn't really take any time off because there's so much uncertainty when we were going to start up again. So, I mean, I was downstairs in my basement. I've got a set of weights. I've got some bands and that kind of stuff. So when we were still in Calgary, I was doing workouts 3-4 times a week. The strength coaches actually brought bikes from the rink to any guys that were sticking around in Calgary during the pause. So I was able to get some bike rides in and stay in shape. So for me, it was, I never really took any time off. I wanted to make sure I was ready to hit the ground running and if there was a restart. And then we moved back to Ontario in the beginning of May, and I built a gym in my basement here. We just moved into our new place here. So I built the gym, got everything set up here that I needed. And other than that, it was kind of just normal training from there. I got on the ice with my goalie coach that I've had since I was 10 years old in Stony Creek, and just kind of went to work and stayed ready for whenever that pause was over. So other than working out at home and not in a big group, that's really the only thing that changed for me. So the biggest thing for me was I just didn't really take any time off. I didn't want to allow myself to get comfortable in an uncertain situation and make sure I was ready.
Is it hard now because we don't know when things start to know how to sort of scale up and ramp up? Or do you just have one speed? Once you're working out, you're working out. Once you're training on the ice, you're training on the ice.
Yeah, at this point, I haven't got training on the ice yet, but off ice, I've been, there's one speed. I've been going 5 days a week now, bike rides, workout, just trying to build that strength. And I'll get back on the ice once there's a set date. And if not, I'll probably still get back on the ice once or twice a week in the next week or two, just to, get timing back and stuff like that. My conditioning should be there with all the rides and stuff like that I've done, but, nothing really imitates being on the ice. So just getting out there, getting the feel for pucks again, getting your timing back and starting to track some pucks. So I'll start to do that within the next week or two. And, hopefully there's a start date at some point soon, and then you can really start to ramp things up. But off ice, things are as ramped up as they can get and just waiting to get back on the ice.
Okay, so when you get back on the ice, I got a two-parter here. One, I want to know about Pat Dipronio. You mentioned, I'm assuming that's who you're talking about when you talk about getting back with your goalie coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I read some of the excellent articles in The Athletic over the past couple of years about your work. And I need to know what the dungeon, I need a description of the quote-unquote dungeon and a little bit of your history there. And then maybe if you could, there's probably a good lesson here for kids because not everybody's been able to stay on the ice or be in the practice environment that they would normally be in. What do you focus on outside of team environment? What are your foundations when you're getting this ice time that you really drill down on to make sure when you get back into a team environment at the highest level of the world, you're ready to go?
Yeah, well, the dungeon it's like probably a third of a full sheet of ice. There's not a ton of room out there. Basically, all those shots you get are grade A, high danger scoring chances. I usually get a couple of my guys my buddies that they play pro over in Europe that I've played with in the past. And they come out, my goalie coach, Pat, as you mentioned before, he'll drop the drills. And basically the first little bit is just timing and tracking, get my feet under me. And then the last, 30, 40 minutes of the hour session, it's, he basically tries to kill me. If there's 3 shots to a drill and you don't stop all 3, it doesn't count as a rep. So we call it, once we get back to get my conditioning back and my timing back, we start to do 10s, and you have to do 10 perfect sets. Sometimes you might do 12 sets and you have a really good set. Sometimes he kills you and you have to do 25 before you get to 10 perfect because the shooters are so good and the situations aren't ideal in there. So that's why we call it the dungeon, because you go in there and it's time to work. You come out and you don't always feel the best, but you definitely accomplish something. So you're always exhausted. You're gasping for air. You want some water, but when you're in there for that hour, all that matters is the work that you put in. So whatever you put in there, you get out on the ice, and that's what I've been able to do for the last little bit. So a lot of credit goes to Patty. He always knows how to get the best out of me, and he knows when to push and when to pull, and that's why we've had such a great relationship, and obviously why I've stuck with him for 23 years.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it would sound like the value there is in that compete, and like as you get tired, do you worry about technical details, slipping with fatigue, or is that part of the process here, is making sure you can focus on those details as you tire, because you're going to tire in a game, or is it just all about the compete mentality? Like, I'm guessing there's a lot of different takeaways from those sessions, but what to you is the most important? Because I think I do see a lot of work in the offseason where it's so focus and detail driven. I wonder sometimes if that competitive element can go missing at times for goalies.
Yeah, I think that comes into play. Like for the first, if you're going through a long set and you're obviously tired and you're exhausted, and at some point, you're battling it out. You're trying to stay as technical as possible for as tired as you are. And then, you get to set 8, 9, and 10. And sometimes those are just the ones where, you have to battle. Sometimes the saves aren't as technically sound. Sometimes they're not pretty, but just getting whatever you can behind the puck sometimes is all that matters. So I think as the set wears on, you see both elements come into play there. So the first 4, 5, 6 sets are usually pretty easy. 7, 8, your technical stuff is starting to go a little bit, but it's still there, and you're trying to fight through that mental fatigue. And then the last couple sets is just battle and get everything you can behind it. But again, Patty doesn't make it easy on me. Even if you stop the puck, if you put a rebound out front of the net or something like that, or it doesn't go below a certain line that we have marked on the ice, we call them like good rebound lines, where you're putting it out that they're probably not going to touch. Anything above that line, whether you save it or not, you're doing the set over again. So he's a pretty hard on me sometimes. And when you stop the puck and you want to throw your stick at him, he makes you do an extra set. So that's when he knows he's getting the best out of me. And if I'm having a good rep, he'll tell the guys just to miss the net, just so I have to go do another one. Because if the shooters miss the net, you have to redo the set also. So he definitely he knows when to push, like I said, and he's really good at it. So again, all those things kind of come into play there, and he knows when to push.
I was going to ask, do you have to redraw those rebound lines now that you're wearing the Bowers that are designed to be the active rebounds, or not?
No, these are more for keeping them below the dots kind of thing. Anything above the dots, he kind of says is, a rebound that could be in play. Anything below the dots, the guy's pretty much got to already be there. And at that point, again, it's just, desperation, get whatever you can behind it if there is a guy there. So, but usually if you're putting them below the dots, you're in pretty good position for a rebound to recover and make the second stop.
Not to dwell on Pat too much here, Cam, but because I want to ask you, you've worked with some great, obviously I have a relationship and know Dusty in Edmonton. I am a massive fan of Siggy in Calgary, just not only as a goalie coach, but as a person. And I've had the honor of getting to talk to Benoit Allaire over the years, like some really great goalie coaches you've had over the years. And I wanted to ask you about each of them, but it sounds like there's something special there with Pat. That importance, we tend to focus on the guys that you work with, that goalies all over the NHL work with once they're in the NHL. Can you, sounds like it's really important to have that guy for you in the summers that you can go back to and you have that type of relationship where there's an honesty there and a work ethic he drives in you. I guess I'm asking you, can you quantify how important he's been over the years? And is it tough for guys sometimes when you bounce around from different voices if they don't have that one to anchor them in an off season?
Yeah, I think that could be tough. I can't quantify it. Like you said, it's what the relationship I have with Patty and what he's done for me over the years. You can't put it into words. He means so much to my career. He's one of the reasons I am where I am. I have to give him a ton of credit. Without him, I wouldn't be here. So, but like you said, I've been fortunate enough to work with so many great goalie coaches over the years. I've gotten to know and gotten to know them all so well, and they're all just such good people behind the scenes as well. So I've been extremely lucky to work with so many great guys and obviously extremely good coaches. So, but like you said, when you have that one anchor back home that I always come back to is your one constant, it definitely helps, especially when you've been bouncing around as much as I have for the past couple of years. So, and the other good thing about Patty is there's no ego there. The first thing he always does when I sign with a new team or get traded, he's the first one to contact the goalie coach of that team to make sure that if there's anything they want me to work on through the summer, that he's driving it home for them. So there's that continuity between the goalie coaches as well. So they can give him stuff to work on, but ultimately it's Patty that drills it home and gets me to work. So there's, I can't say enough about him and what he's done for my career.
Okay, so the dungeon doesn't sound like a place where you're going to fall in love with goaltending first time out. What made you fall in love with the position? When did Cam Talbot want to be a goalie? And was there a guy that drove that, whether it's in your own experiences or somebody on TV? Obviously, 33 has been the number for the most of your career, at least at the beginning. I know you had to switch to 39 there, but is it a Patrick Waugh thing? Like, how did Cam Talbot fall in love with goaltending?
Yeah, it was the Patrick Waugh thing. Okay. I grew up on a quiet street in Caledonia. I had some good friends just across the street from me, down the street, around the corner, and we'd all just get together, play road hockey like kids do. And I was always the first one to jump in net and throw the pads on. So it started at a young age, probably 4 or 5, when you're playing road hockey and stuff like that with your buddies. I never actually started playing goal until I think I was, maybe 7 or 8 years old when I finally started playing hockey. I was kind of late getting on the ice, but Patrick Waugh was always my favorite goalie growing up. Obviously, you alluded to why I wear number 33 was because of him. He always just seemed to have his big games when his team needed him the most, and that's all you can ask of a goalie, and that's why he was, in my opinion, the best of all time. And whenever there's a save that needs to be made, or Stanley Cup Finals or something like that, he always seemed to come up with that. So, he was kind of my idol growing up, and why I wanted to ultimately be a goalie and what drove me to it.
Was there a point where it became, you went from that, just somebody you watched on TV and maybe emulated playing road hockey to on the ice where you were trying to emulate him? Like, walk me through that quick path from minor hockey to playing Tier 2 junior in Hamilton, and then ultimately from there, to playing NCAA at the University of Alabama-Huntsville.
Yeah, the only way you can really emulate that is just try to bring your A game every day. And when the game's on the line, you want to be that guy. And I've been on some really good teams, all through the ranks and stuff like that. And just try to go out there. And my biggest thing is just give us a chance to win every night. The odd night you're going to steal a game, but most of the time your team just needs you to be, average, stop the shots you're supposed to make and maybe stop a few they're not supposed to here and there. But ultimately, you go out there and you do your job night in and night out, and it's not always going to be perfect, but you just kind of got to get your body behind everything that you can and evaluate after that. But yeah, it was just kind of it was a roller coaster ride. I definitely took the long way to the NHL, as you said, through I played AAA in Stony Creek up to Junior C in Caledonia when I was 16 years old. Made the jump to Junior A for 3 years after that, and then 3 years at Alabama-Huntsville. So definitely was a long road, and then 3+ years in Hartford after I'd signed with New York Rangers. So, not drafted along the way to major juniors of the NHL, and just, continue to work my way up and hopefully get seen.
Was it just a constant progression for you, Cam? Steady in that work ethic and that mentality? Was there a switch that went off at any point from a style perspective where, wow, this is something that became an anchor for me at this age, and that's when the path started? Or is it, I guess, like everything in goaltending, it is a constant evolution, this position?
Yeah, I think it's a constant evolution. Through juniors, you kind of relied on skill and not so much on technique. You're just kind of going out there and playing tier 2, but also managing, going to college and stuff like that. It was, there's not a whole lot of practice time in tier 2. It's not like the OHL or professional hockey. It's
Did you have a goalie coach or just work with Pat at the time too, or?
Pat was actually the goalie coach of the Red Wings when I was there, so that actually worked out.
There's the tie.
Yeah, so he was there, but again, you only get two ice times a week for practice through juniors, which isn't a ton.
Right.
So it really, really took off. I think once I got to college, they really instilled the off ice work ethic as well as the on ice work ethic. And I think that's where my career kind of started to form. I showed up as a freshman. You don't do a ton of off ice workouts and stuff like that with tier 2 junior A teams. So once I got to college and they implement that, I think that's where I grew the most. And from my freshman year to my junior year of college, you can definitely see the numbers illustrate that. Once I started getting in better shape off the ice, it translates to on ice success. So I think that was a huge thing there. And then I continued that moving forward. So I think that was the biggest thing, was just realizing how tough it is off the ice as it is on the ice. So I had to kind of put those two things together.
Next is Benoit Allaire, with both, obviously, because I know he's a guy that, for the longest time didn't want to have a goalie coach in the American League. He wanted to be working with at both levels with all the guys, even if he couldn't be on the ice all the time. So you would have had a lot of exposure to him. But real quick, first, you paid for everything that Alabama-Huntsville gave to you earlier in your career in terms of opportunity. And like you said, the lessons about the importance of off ice. You got a chance to give back to them this summer. Can you just walk our readers through, our listeners, through how you got involved and basically, I don't know if you want to put this label on it, but everyone else, you helped save the program down there. How important was that to you? And walk us through that process and what made you want to get involved to help keep that going as a hockey program?
Well, I was contacted, I saw Friday night that it was Friday back in, I think, June or July, that the program had been canceled, and they didn't give any of the alumni, the players, anything a heads up. They just kind of cut the program, used kind of COVID as one of the excuses to cut funding and stuff like that. So, but they didn't really give anybody a heads up. So two of the bigger alumni guys that have been down there, they went, got a meeting with the president of Alabama-Huntsville, and he essentially gave us 4.5 days to raise $750,000. And those guys ended up putting quite a bit of money in themselves. Ex-teammates of mine, ex-coaches, they got in touch with me and basically asked me to, use my platform that ultimately they gave me. I wouldn't be where I am without that program. So I just used my platform to get the word out there, get the GoFundMe page out there. I think I was on the phone 4 or 5 times a day doing interviews, doing podcasts, doing all this kind of stuff, trying to get the word out there, and just how important Alabama-Huntsville and hockey in the South means to the development of hockey in the South. So, I just wanted to, like you said, kind of give back to what they were able to provide me, and ultimately give 24, 25 kids that opportunity to live out their dream of playing college hockey, and maybe one day get the opportunity to play professional as well. So it was just kind of a no-brainer to jump on board and do anything I could to help. And by Friday morning, we were actually able to meet the goal of 750,000, and they announced before the weekend that the program was back up and running. So they took no time. So give a lot of credit to them. They stuck to their word, and we got to thank all the donors and everyone that helped contribute to that cause, because it was a whirlwind, but we were able to do it. And hopefully at some point college hockey can get back playing this year, and we can see the product out there again. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, congratulations to everyone involved, and good on you for doing it. Because I mean, not just a really tight window to raise a lot of money, but at a time when there are a lot of people, it's tougher for people to give, right? Like everybody's going through COVID and everything that's going on in the world. Just I think a credit to a lot of people that got involved there. So I wanted to make sure we got a chance to talk about that. Moving on to the Rangers, Benny. What I mean, can you state what impact he's had on your career? And without giving too much away, I know I've talked to a lot to him about, answer question, beat the pass, solve the equation, that type of thing. What, if there's a takeaway that is still a part of your game today, and there's probably more than just one, what would it be from your time working with Benoit Allaire?
Oh, Benny, he's just such a calming presence. I mean, he just never seems to be in a bad mood. He's always so happy-go-lucky, and it's just, it doesn't matter what happened the night before. He comes the next day, and he just has the same attitude, the same presence about him, and he just calms you down no matter what. And getting to work with him for the better part of 5 years with the organization, 3 in Hartford and then 2 up with the Rangers, was just just an unbelievable experience. And I always say that I don't think I'd be in the NHL without him either. He did so much for me. I think coming out of college, I played more like Jonathan Quick than I did Henrik Lundqvist, and we kind of found that happy median. I was out to the hash marks and trying to be the acrobatic athletic save back to the post and stuff like that, and he just kind of reeled me back in, and like he does with all of his goals, they look so calm in the net. He finds that sweet spot for you, whether it's heels at the top of the paint, toes at the top of the paint, and just know that he just makes you feel comfortable that you can stop this shot from here, but you're in that much better position to make that second save or third save or whatever it may be to get back there. So, I mean, he just, I don't know, retooled me a little bit, brought me back in a little bit more, made me more efficient. I wasn't so tired after games anymore. And you can see that, he's moved so many goalies through there that have been backups to Hank. They always seem to go other places and get other opportunities just because working with him, your level of play just kind of ramps up. And I owe so much to him. Number one, for signing me out of college, and then number 2 for really developing me and like you said, making that drive to Hartford all the time when he was with New York, and going over video over the phone and stuff like that before I was able to come up. So the amount of gratitude I have to Benny is through the roof, and he's just such a great person, a great goalie coach, and like I said, I wouldn't be where I am today without him either.
It's funny because his impact, you mentioned all the guys that have gone through, I think it even goes beyond, like it's extended. There's sort of, like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. You talk to Devin Dubnyk about what he learned when he was in Arizona, and his foundation, much like you talked about positioning there, was, hey, if I can beat this pass on my feet, that's the depth I want. If I can't, then I'm probably too aggressive. And that came from Sean Burke, who of course reinvented his game completely under Benoit Allaire in Arizona. So positioning seems to be a foundation of it, Cam. And you had talked about changing where you played. But it's not just telling you where to play or having one rule for everyone. It's about letting guys figure out where they're at their best. Does that sound like a fair description?
Oh yeah, that's very fair. I mean, you can tell that every goalie that comes through there, they're not going to play the exact same way. Like Lundqvist can play so deep in his net. His reads are so great. He's so quick. And other guys, we have to take another step out or something like that. And like you said, Benny he gives you that wiggle room to play with. He lets you find where your sweet spot is. If you think you can play that far out and still make that and still get to the next play on your feet, all the power to you. As long as you feel comfortable enough to do that. It's when you're, once habits like that start creeping in, maybe you get a little bit too high and you can't make it on your feet, then he just kind of pulls you back and says, okay, can we make that play from 6 inches, 9 inches, a little bit deeper? And then can you get there on your feet? It's just little tweaks and adjustments here, but ultimately he gives you that rope to go with. And he's never going to tell you have to be here, you have to be there. He lets you define your own positioning. And as long as you can get there on your feet and you feel comfortable to make that save, then that's all that matters. So that's, again, one of the best qualities about him is he's not, like a slave driver. He's going to give you, he's going to give you options that you can play with. And he just kind of gives you the tools and gives you the video and stuff like that to kind of see and help any way you can. So again, it's just one of those calming presence that, you want to be around every day, and it just makes you better.
You mentioned Hank. What's your takeaways from working with him? We could probably do a whole segment on this alone. And yet, I think probably my guess would be much like Patrick, how you talked about Patrick wasn't so much trying to play like him as adapt the personality and the work ethic. Nobody plays like Hank. I'm not sure. I think you once told me, I'm not sure anybody ever will play like Hank. What were the lessons? Were they more about the mindset, the mentality, how he got ready? And the one thing I will say, work ethic. I remember him coming in here even last year, Cam. It was on the second end of back-to-backs, heavily optional skate, only 7 forwards out. Expected Georgiev to be out there for sure, and he was. But there's Henrik out there, first on, last off, doing breakaway drills, and absolutely battling on every puck. And I was blown away by that work ethic at that stage, like just a year or two ago of his career. I'm guessing that rubs off.
It does. And yeah, there's no one that competes harder in practice than Hank. And that's one of the biggest things I took away from him. Not just the preparation, not just the mentality of it heading into a game, not just his preparation. It was the work ethic that really stood out to me. You always see him in the gym off the ice, but on the ice, like you said, he's always one of the first guys out. I mean, Benny takes the goalies out, 2, 3, 4 times a week, and you skate for 15, 20 minutes before anyone else gets on the ice. And it's just doing little crease drills, and we'll get a shooter out and stuff like that. But, Hank's feet are just so quick, and it's because he puts in that work. Whether he played the night before, he's still out there with whoever his partner is, putting in the work the next day, trying to get faster, trying to get quicker, trying to get those reads down. And like you said, even at the end of practice, he's more than likely one of the last guys off the ice because he wants to make sure that he's battling it out to the very end. And, if a drill doesn't go his way at the end, he's going to make sure he does it until it does. So it doesn't matter how tired he gets, he puts in that work. And obviously that translates into games. You never see Hank give up on a play. And that's why he's been so great for so long, is he has that mentality that, he almost hates to get scored on as much in practice as he does in a game. That's kind of his mentality. And again, what makes him so great.
From there, it's on to the Oilers. And I mean, everyone, I think, points to the big season just because it's so rare to see a goalie play as much as you did that year. Finished 4th in Vezina voting. What was the lessons you took away from playing that much? I remember Schwartzy telling me he wasn't worried about you because of all those lessons you learned, as you said, at Alabama-Huntsville. Like, physically just wasn't a problem. You took care of yourself in a way that it wasn't going to be a worry. But sometimes when you're playing so much, you have to manage your rest, and it can be hard to manage your game because it's hard to get out early and do the extra work or stay out late if you're always preparing to play the next night because there are no breaks. What'd you learn about yourself in that process? What were some of the takeaways in terms of managing your game and managing your rest during that season?
The biggest thing is, you learn that you can, you can tweak little things here and there just in practice and through video. And it doesn't always have to be done, with 1,000 repetitions on the ice. Schwartzy and I would, come up with a plan and stuff like that. If I played the night before, whether, it was just him and I got out there maybe 10 minutes before. And if there was something that we needed to look at or address, then we would go over it before practice and try to just get out there for 10 minutes and play around with some different positionings and stuff like that. It was never meant to be taxing, but it's, a way to, work on some stuff without overexerting yourself, I guess. So The other thing for me is, managing that rest was a big part with Todd McClellan. He was always so good about coming in, and he'd always see me in Schwartz's office the next day after a game, and we'd be going over video, and Todd would pop his head in and be like, "Todd, did you go to practice?" kind of thing. And, once it got later on in the season and, you're up around 60, 65 games, there's a little bit more leeway. And he would always come in and make sure that I was okay because he wanted me to go back in the net the day after that. So there's always that constant communication with the coaching staff and the great relationship I had with Schwartzy. I knew that I could be honest with them about my fatigue level, or, sometimes it's just a mental thing when you're playing that much. Like you said, you always have to be on, you always have to be mentally engaged. And sometimes, when you get a night off and you're on the bench, you're not constantly focused on the game, and it's almost just like a mental rest, if you will, when you're playing that much. So when you're not getting that, sometimes you have to get that on your off days. So the communication between the coaching staff and myself was always there. There's always a two-way communication line, and I think that was part of the biggest thing too. But managing off ice stuff and on ice stuff was never really a problem because Todd and the staff was so great, and it just kind of leaned on whatever I was feeling, and we go from there. So, that was, one of the highlights of my career, being able to play 73 games and get the Oilers back in the playoffs. And, that was a heck of a run, and, something I'll look back on fondly.
I was going to say a bad non-goalie interference call away from, but we won't go there. That's the goalie union still has a protest active on that one. To be honest with you, we've filed that one, and that will never go away. I watched you guys do a game day warm up once, Cam, and as you moved things around the ice, and it was you and Schwartzy working, it all seemed to be cradles. And I was just curious if you could speak to me about the importance of using cradles as part of a warm-up when you're trying to get ready for a game. I think we see kids go out there a lot, and goalies go out there young ages a lot, and sometimes it's just because the kid's shooting on them and they're not on the same page, but sometimes there's that feeling like you got to tickle the twine, bar down, everything's got to be a real challenge. Like when you're trying to get ready for a game, do you still see value in cradles? Like, is that still something you use as part of your game day warm-up, or has that changed since leaving Edmonton?
No, I mean, that's something that you always just want to go out there and feel the puck, and it helps when you have a goalie coach that can rip the puck like Schwartzy can. We don't
want to feed that. We don't want to feed that ego too much on those shots. He keeps telling me how good they are.
I know. Hopefully, he's not going to listen to this, but I'm sure if he does, he's going to be pretty excited to hear that his shot's one of the best. But when you got a guy like him, you can get out there 10, 15 minutes early before a game day skate, and like you said, you have to be on the same page. He hit me in the head quite a few times throughout the year, but give him a pass on some of those ones. But sometimes that's just feeling the puck, feeling good on a game day. Like you said, you don't have to tickle the twine. Sometimes it's just, watching the puck into, your glove side shoulder or something like that. It's not always just catching the puck. Sometimes you have to take them up high and try not to give off that rebound. So when you can, work on little things like that in practice and game day mornings, just to kind of feel good about your game heading into the night, and knowing that, anything up in this range from this angle, I just kind of have to put my body behind it, and it's just going to kind of fall into me. So whenever you can feel the puck like that, feel good going into a game, feel good from those angles and the spots that he was taking the shots from, it always translates. So we always tried to do, I think, 5 from each spot on the ice that we had picked out. And, ultimately getting 50, 55 cradles a morning before you go out there, and you go into pregame skate in the game feeling pretty good about yourself. So it doesn't have to be a big glove save to warm up with. Sometimes it's just nice to work on your tracking and just watch it into your body. So those were, obviously helped in getting prepared for games.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously I've seen him speak about this at Hockey Canada with young kids too, in terms of using cradles, because the mechanics of if we're in position, it's coming at us, right? And sort of encouraging sort of some of those mechanics. So I was curious if that was something you'd continued on with. I better say last one, because I can't believe how long we've been talking. My apologies, Cam, but the move to Siggy and Calgary. And again, another guy that we know really well and are big fans of here at Ingle, and had the pleasure of being on the ice with him over the years. And what's that transition like? You're changing goalie coaches. You've got this strong voice and support system in Pat. You've worked with Schwartz. You've worked with a guy I think should be in the Hall of Fame one day soon in Benoit Allaire, along with his brother. and now another goalie coach in Jordan Sigalet, and now, Freddie Chabot, another guy. Another guy I've had the pleasure of being on the ice with and really enjoyed the time with. As you change through all these voices, tell me first about what made Siggy special as a coach. Was there anything that you guys zeroed in on that might have been a little bit different? And how do you have to approach that? Or is it all just different voices, different tools, open mind to everyone? Because that is a lot of different voices in a short period of time.
It is. And, when I first signed with Calgary, came back to Ontario to work with Pat and stuff like that. And I remember, first you get the call from Siggy welcoming you to the team and stuff like that, looking forward to working with you and everything. And then, a few weeks later, I get back to Ontario, and it just kind of speaks to Siggy's character and his commitment. He was in Ohio visiting his wife's family, and he called me, asked me when I was going to be on the ice that summer. I said, I'll be on the ice Wednesday and Friday this week. And he goes, okay, I'm going to drive up from Ohio, wherever he was. And so we made the 5-hour drive up. We escaped from 3 to 4 in the dungeon with Patty. He just wanted to come in, first of all, meet me in person over the summer, see where I train, see how I train, meet my goalie coach, took us to dinner afterwards kind of thing, and then ended up driving 5 hours back that night. So that's just, his commitment level. He wanted to come up, meet me in person before I actually got to camp and stuff like that, and just see where I train and to meet my goalie coach that I'm working with here. So, wow. I mean, that's, I think you might have been here for 3 hours and drove for 10, 11 hours in one day. So, I mean, that just kind of speaks to his character, his commitment to his goalies, and, developing that relationship early on. So from there on, it just kind of, our relationship built, our trusting each other built. And, he's one of those guys that he invests himself so much in the game that he's just as mad after games as you are if it doesn't go your way, or he shares in the celebrations as much as you do. And he was almost like a big brother that way, kind of like Schwartzy was. And, I had such a good bond with both of them. And, but it all kind of started when Siggy drove up like that. And I could tell that he's just so committed to his goalies, and anything you need from him to make you successful, whether it be video, whether it be drills on the ice. If there's anything that I ever needed on the ice, he would just alter the drills and stuff like that beforehand. And, we'd just go from there. But, we had that trust in each other, and from day one, and, it blossomed into, a great relationship and ultimately a great friendship too. I think we'll definitely be staying in touch, even though I'm not in Calgary anymore. So it's one of those relationships and bonds that, we'll have for a while.
I guess that's important, building that trust and building that relationship, as I said, with so many different voices. At the end of the day, we can talk about technique and philosophies and all that, but it all comes down to trusting that guy to have that voice in your game and trusting that relationship, that there's an openness back and forth about what works and what doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And if you don't have that, sometimes that relationship can be almost detrimental. So I've been extremely lucky, like you said, with Pat starting at home, and then working with Benny, working with Schwartzy, even Kim Dillabaugh in Philly for the short time I was there. We had a great relationship, and then moving on to Siggy. So I've been very, very lucky to be able to work with some great goalie coaches and better people. So, nothing but great things to say about all of them, obviously. So they've all been a big part of my career in so many different ways.
Well, Cam, we're looking forward to watching you continue that career with the Minnesota Wild. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us here today. I know the audience here at In Goal Radio, the podcast, is going to love this. And there are definitely a few takeaways from this conversation that we'll be breaking out into separate stories, and looking forward to sharing that with them as well. Thanks so much for the time. Best of luck the rest of the summer.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
He's just a cool guy to talk to. That's what I like about Cam. Like, he's just laid back and shares. He's always been like that from the time that we first got to know him a little bit with the New York Rangers. But I was familiar with him when he played for University of Alabama-Huntsville. And my pal, Doug McLean, the former coach and general manager and president of the Columbus Blue Jackets, his son Clark was a teammate of Cam's at University of Alabama-Huntsville. So there, it goes way back to that. And Herb Brooks from the movie, remember?
Right. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, their son was the backup to Cam Talbot Who's the actor?
Kurt
Help me out
Russell.
here. Kurt Russell.
Kurt
Yes.
Russell. I know they had a goalie son because I think at one point he played like Cam, Junior B, I believe, here in Vancouver at one point, because you would see him and Goldie Hawn around the rink. So yeah, that's that. There it is, the small world.
And Doug would come home from watching Clark play for a weekend, and he'd say, "I hung out with Herb Brooks all the time." And I'm like, I don't think you. That's right. He's like, no, I meant Kurt Russell and the Miracle on Ice, and because Goldie and Kurt would be watching their son play at Alabama-Huntsville.
I want to say top of my head without being able to Google it here. Wyatt was the name of their son who was a goaltender. Yeah. See, so
well done. So here's my theory for Cam Talbot, and this goes to where he signed and where his family is right now and what they're growing with. He has twins.
Yep.
And you talk about that, and he's in the Twin Cities. So there's got to be something with the kids and the Twin Cities and the twins and all that kind of stuff. So there's a theme there that you can work with.
Okay, there's definitely a theme you can work with. My hunch is he's going to probably treat that about as well as he did my question about how deeply he looked into the systems and the styles matching. When the calls start pouring in at noon, you're just looking for a fit, and you're probably not thinking about it as deeply as I suggested or as you suggested with the Twins and the Twin Cities. But I will say, I agree with you on the conversation. Sadly, that's the longest one I've had a chance to have with him. Probably the longest conversation I had with him to this point was when he was with the Rangers. Because once you get to Calgary and Edmonton, as a reporter in Vancouver, those teams fly in night before for road games, and then you've only got the morning skates. And so we actually had a really good chat this year, one of the times when he came in, and we have an article, shameless plug for ingoalmag.com and the premium membership with Jordan Sigalet and Cam Talbot doing a drill, and Jordan sort of walking us through the keys to this drill for In Goal Premium. So that's one of our pro drill tips. I had a great chat with him about gear and equipment that day because he wasn't playing, but especially that year in Edmonton, he's playing so much that anytime he came through town, your only opportunity to talk to him was post game after they played, and that's hardly the time for. You're not having 45-minute conversations about Pat Dipronio and Granger goaltending in the dungeon post game after an Oilers Canucks tilt. But so yeah, in some ways, kind of nice to see him leave Alberta, just because it means we'll have a chance to catch up on a more detailed basis. And as much as I enjoyed that conversation, I'm really looking forward to being able to have more of them now.
I liked your question. I don't know how much actually goes into it from the player's perspective when you're talking about dollars, and especially trying to get your name off the market because there's such a large amount of goaltenders available. But he was offered the 2 or the 3 year deal too, and that was unique with his scenario.
Yeah, and one of the few guys to get more than 2, and obviously like there's where you see the fit with the young kids and wanting to find that stability in a city and with an organization, and as he said, I mean, very understandable. And it was basically, what was it, him and Markstrom? I guess if RFA in Matt Murray getting term in Ottawa, but out in the UFA crowd, like it was all mostly 2-year deals, some 1-year deals.
Yeah.
Not a lot of guys got more than that. Markstrom goes into Calgary obviously on the 6, Cam on the 3, and I think most of them were shorter term. And so good for him, well deserved. He has basically only had one bad season in the National Hockey League, one sort of, I wouldn't call it bad, just one down season. Has been an exceptional goaltender, had a 919 by the end of things there in Calgary last season, and I think is going to be a really good fit. Like, he may not have crunched the numbers before signing, but we did with some clear sight analytics and looked at his strengths and how they fit that team and that system and what they give up. And as much as he joked about them being a great defensive team and any goalie would like to go there are some specifics that fit well. So good for him, and I'm sure it's going to be a great fit, and you're excited for him.
And he went there as the backup and just knew that he had to be ready when the time came. And he was.
Calgary. Yeah.
And now he parlays it into a 3-year deal.
How much did we talk about during that pause and break to guys who were trying to manage when to start working out, when to hit it hard, when to not to? worry about burnout. And when we asked him how he managed that, what did he say? He just worked out the whole time, never stopped. Yeah. And there's something to be said for work ethic and determination, as much as we assume all pros have it. You know, he had a great example of the next level of work ethic and determination in Henrik Lundqvist. And you get that sense that when you talk to him and you hear from his goalie coaches, that he's got the exact same thing. And when you hear stories about how he approached the pause, when you hear him talk about Alabama-Huntsville and learning how to work out physically and how that was a big change for him, you talk to his goalie coaches like that. When he played 73, they weren't really worried about him because like he was a physical specimen. Like he really takes care of himself. And that's so important this day and age. I long for the day where I don't have to write stories about goalies turning their careers around because they started by losing 20 pounds in the summer. It amazes me that I still have to write them every year or two.
Yeah.
But there's an example of a guy who figured that out in college, not waiting until he turned pro to figure it out.
It's a true art to be good, whether you're playing 73 or 26. And he's done both. Before we wrap up with Cam Talbot, just the idea of a player trying with his new technology, and I'm new to it with the access pads, but how the puck just pops off the pad, and your conversation about the rebounds, and I was with you with the question about where you're putting those rebounds and shooting them way out, and I thought that was going to be the good part, but like keeping the rebounds below the dots but sending them way out. I thought that was a neat little bit of inside the realm of goalie coaching.
Yeah, no, and some great specifics there, right? Because it doesn't matter if it's hot or not. It might help you a little bit if it's hot, but if you're sending it back into the middle, that's still a bad rebound. You got to make sure you're steering it to the outside and off to the wings, whether it comes off hot or cold. So yeah, I was thinking about it and I had to ask the question because as he started talking about it, that was what came to my mind because we'd had that discussion on the active Bauer rebounds, and just a great answer to show that. Yeah, like active rebounds can still be bad rebounds too if you don't put them in the right spot. So those are the types of insights we love to bring to you here at the In-Goal Radio Podcast. And thanks for Cam for really taking a lot of time out of his day after a stressful couple of weeks here to answer the questions at that level and to give us insights into the position that I think I'd like to say you don't get anywhere else, and we don't get them unless they're willing to spend the kind of time and give us that type of deep thought that Cam did today. So really appreciated it.
Couple of incredible conversations. One with a person dealing with a pandemic over at the Hockey Shop, source for sports Surrey, thehockeyshop.com with Matt Twiff, and then another player and human being discussing life and free agency, betting on yourself and coming through with a 3-year contract on the other side with Talbot. Proof that if you believe, you can do it. Thanks for listening to In-Goal Radio, the podcast. I'm Darren Millard for Kevin Woodley and David Hutchison. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next week when we discuss our favorite goalie masks around Halloween.